What's happening, everybody? On today's show, we're going to catch up with Charlie Potter of Bama Online at 24/7 Sports. We'll find out what's happening with the Alabama quarterback position and get his thoughts on a couple of guys who just got drafted. Also, we'll go around the conference as Hugh Freeze talks about his new quarterback, Payton Thorne. Locked on SEC starts right now.
Are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what is happening, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And again, shout out to our everydayers joining us as well. All right, let's jump into it. Plenty to discuss. We appreciate getting on Charlie Potter here. He is of Bama Online at 24/7 Sports. And so does a great job covering the Alabama football beat and all things Alabama. And he joins us now. Charlie, welcome in, man. Thanks for joining us.
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, let's jump into it, Charlie, because look, as we look at Alabama right now, they went through the spring. We still don't know who their quarterback is going to be. What do you make of where we are and really who could be Alabama's starting quarterback as we look ahead to the fall?
Yeah, it's still up in the air. I think that Alabama exited the spring with Jalen Milroe and Ty Simpson, and Nick Saban felt there was a need for more competition in that position, so they went out and got Tyler Buchner, and he has familiarity with Tommy Rees coming from Notre Dame. I don't think he's guaranteed to win the job. Now, we've looked at what Alabama's done in the transfer portal in the past, and a lot of times they go out and get guys that can make immediate impacts. We just talked about Henry Tohatoa, Jamison Williams, Jahmyr Gibbs. You can just run down the list, and most of those guys do come in and are starters. But at the quarterback position, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. They're going to have summer 7-on-7s, and then preseason camp will ramp up at the beginning of August. And at that point, you're going to have to start, dwindling down reps because it's tough to split first-team reps between three guys. And it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. And I think this thing can linger into, the season because Alabama opens the year against Middle Tennessee at home before hosting Texas in a big game across the country. I know a lot of eyeballs are going to be on that one. But it's a situation where we've seen this before. You think back to 2011 when Greg McElroy had moved on. You had A.J. McCarron and Phillip Sims were battling for that quarterback position, and Alabama had a week 2 game against Penn State where it entered that kind of wondering what the quarterback situation was going to be. So I think it can linger a little bit longer. And I do think, though, Alabama has the horses around the quarterback to run the race and win it. But it's going to be really important for that guy that's calling the shots back there and distributing the ball for him to not only be able to make plays but take care of the football. And I think all three guys that are kind of at the top of that pecking order, they have some work to do in all those departments.
We're talking with Charlie Potter of Bama Online 24/7 Sports. And Charlie does a great job. I was just reading a piece he's got up right now. Alabama DBs Kool-Aid McKinstry, Malachi Moore are among candidates for the Lot Impact Trophy Award watch list. And Charlie, before we look too far ahead at more on this upcoming season, I want to rewind a little bit and look back on some guys who just heard their names called. I mean, we just saw a ton of Alabama guys drafted again in the NFL draft, including two really good ones at number 1 and number 3 overall in Bryce Young and Will Anderson. How, in your opinion, has Alabama been able to consistently do this and cranking out so much high caliber talent to the NFL?
Yeah, I mean, I think just from a NFL standpoint, Nick Saban spent time in the NFL. He runs his program in a very professional way. I think guys are prepared for the league. But at Alabama, they recruit top athletes year in and year out. I mean, you're going to be hard pressed to find an Alabama class not ranked among the top 5 or at least the top 2 really each year, just in terms of recruiting hauls. And so when they get those elite players on campus, then they develop them. They've been in a system that runs a lot like an NFL franchise. And then They're playing against elite competition, whether it's the SEC or, most years the college football playoff, and then they go on and they get drafted. And you're right. I mean, Alabama's had, I think 123 players drafted during Nick Saban's tenure. 44 of those have been first-round picks. You start spitting out some of the numbers sometimes when it comes to the things he's accomplished over this tenure, and you find yourself, not believing what you're saying just because they are crazy, like you say. But yeah, I think it's just kind of a step-by-step process in terms of they recruit well, they develop those players, and they turn them into pros.
It's crazy. I mean, they're just all the guys that they have had drafted. I do want to ask you about a couple of specific ones. We'll do that in just a second. By the way, we're talking with Charlie Potter. Follow him on Twitter at Charlie_Potter. We'll get back to him in just a second. But first, real quick, I want to remind you guys, thank you for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. And of course, I want to remind you this episode is presented to you by our friends over at Built Bar. If you are looking for a delicious snack, but you don't want all the sugar and calories, you need the best tasting protein bar ever, and that is Built Bar. You got to go try it. If you're like me and you want to make healthier snack choices, but you don't want to compromise on taste, go try Built Bar. They're covered in 100% real chocolate. The macros are incredible. 17 grams of protein packed in there, only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar. And you can find them all at Built.com right now. They got tons of different flavors up there, everything from peanut butter brownie to cookies and cream, churro flavored. They've got the puffs that are a little bit lighter. And you got them all also at Sam's Club and Walmart. You can find them as well now. So you don't have to just go to Built.com. You can go to your local Walmart and Sam's Club and find them there. It is Built Bar. The website is Built.com. Go check them out today and order yourself a box. You will not regret it. All right, we are continuing our conversation with Charlie Potter of Bama Online at 24/7 Sports. And Charlie, want to just jump back into it. Will Anderson Jr., he goes number 3 overall to the Houston Texans. They traded up for him. He's a guy that was just so dominant and super productive 2 seasons ago. This past season, his numbers came down a little bit, but was certainly more double-teamed a lot more this year. What did you make of Will Anderson's performance in year 3, I guess, versus year 2?
Yeah, year 2 was an all-world year. He's pretty unstoppable. And I think, anytime you have a season like that, you're going to garner attraction from opposing offensive coordinators. Maybe let's avoid number 31 at all costs if you can. And I do think you're right. Double teams came into the picture. Alabama also dropped him into coverage a little bit, which I don't think is his strong suit. I don't think that'll be something we see a lot from him. Now, he can do it, but Alabama did a little more than maybe probably even Nick Saban would have liked. And I think, they had that cheetah package where they tried to get 3 outside linebackers on the field at the same time, and it didn't really work out that well. It was an idea, good in theory, but it wasn't executed that well. And so, it was a little bit of a down year for the defense, a little bit of a down year for Will, but he still had a great year. I mean, heck, he cleaned up shop when it comes to the national awards. And I think a lot of those kind of looked at the big picture, what he's done over the course of his career, and a year where he is getting a lot of attention from opposing teams. He's still able to register double-digit sacks. He's near the top of nearly every disruptive play category in the SEC. So he still had a fantastic season, and he was a huge leader for this team as well. He was that as a sophomore, really, but he was really the identity of the defense, the zone setter. And I think whenever you're talking about a team trading up to take him, you're doing so knowing he can be the face of the franchise on the defensive side of the ball, and just that guy that he's going to come into work every day, and nobody's going to question, what his motives are, why he's there. He's going to be very evident because Will's just a tireless worker, and you don't get to see a ton of him from a media standpoint, but being a big name player, he came up plenty, and he's just anybody that is around him, you leave with a positive feeling. He's going to have that kind of impact. So I get that right now it seems like a lot, and maybe, you could have another high pick last year or next year. Who knows how that turns out? But to be able to get kind of face of the franchise players on both sides of the ball this year when you're bringing in a new head coach, I think that was kind of a no-brainer for the Texans.
One more for you, Charlie, as we talk about some of the Alabama guys who got drafted. Thoughts, we just talked about Will Anderson going to the Texans. Thoughts on Henry Tohatoa, who also got drafted by the Texans. He'll get to reunite with Will Anderson and Christian Harris. Just kind of thoughts on Henry Tohatoa.
I think Henry was a player that came in, and people, Alabama fans especially, hadn't had a lot of good things to say about Henry Tohatoa because they're used to kind of this physical, heat-seeking missile of a linebacker. And Henry flies to the ball. He makes plays. But he's not just he's not a thing that he doesn't get enough credit for is the intelligence that he brings to the table, what kind of knowledge he has of the defense. Because, he's coming in as a transfer from Tennessee, and now he's coming from a program that was set up similarly under Jeremy Pruitt, but he comes in right away and is your Mike linebacker. He's the quarterback of the defense because he's a smart, intuitive player, and he spends time, breaking down film and, learning all the things he needs to know. I think his knowledge and willingness to do that is beneficial to the position he plays. He actually has experience with Christian Harris too. I think that's a plus. They're really good friends. I think, Christian was one of the first people that called him. So I think familiarity with Christian, with probably D'Amico and the mindset that they share. And I think just his ability to recognize things pre-snap, get guys lined up is beneficial. I think, he can continue to improve as a player, certainly. But I think for one, the thing that stands out for him first and foremost is his intuition as a player. And if you're going to be the signal caller, making all the decisions on that side of the ball, at least on the field, that's super important at the next level. And I think Henry doesn't get enough credit for that, like I said. And I think D'Amico and his background, do you want somebody to be able to make plays? Sure. And I think Henry can do that, but his strong suit is just his intelligence on that side of the ball.
He is Charlie Potter. Of course, follow him at Charlie_Potter, covering Alabama football for Bama Online. Of course, Bama Online 247 is the Twitter account, and you can find all the work up there at 24/7 Sports. Charlie, thanks so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right, that's Charlie Potter there of 24/7 Sports and Bama Online. Thank you guys so much for making us your first listen every day. Coming up next, we're going to go around the conference, and we'll share some comments from Hugh Freeze talking about his new quarterback, Payton Thorne. That's next. All right, roll along here, Locked On SEC, and appreciate Charlie Potter for joining us there, kind of doing the show a little bit backwards today, but let's do it. We got plenty to discuss, plenty of topics. Let's go around the conference.
Boots out to the right. Takes the handoff. What a catch! Around the conference.
And we start with Hugh Freeze talking about his new quarterback, Payton Thorne. Hugh Freeze doing a radio interview on Wednesday and talked about some of the traits that Auburn was pursuing when they went after Payton Thorne in the portal. He compared Thorne to former Ole Miss quarterback Bo Wallace, who a lot of folks will remember was very successful at Ole Miss in Hugh Freeze's tenure there. Appearing on Greg McElroy and Cole Kubelik's radio show in Birmingham on Wednesday, Hugh Freeze said, look, I love Payton Thorne's maturity. I think he brings a level of leadership to that room that's needed. I kind of relate to when I got to Ole Miss the first time we signed Bo Wallace. He wasn't just the most flashiest, but boy, he could run the RPOs and make good decisions when we needed it. I just thought we needed to have that in the room to elevate our quarterback room. Freeze did say he remains excited about Robbie Ashford and Holden Geriner. He said Auburn would have a 3-man quarterback competition this offseason, and Thorne comes in after 2 years as a starter at Michigan State. Now, Hugh Freeze weighed in on a little bit more on what Thorne will bring to the table, talking with reporters at the Regents Pro-Am fundraiser this week. He said, look, it's Thorne's football IQ, his toughness, his experience, his leadership. I just think he's won football games in a very good conference, and I think it elevates that room. And again, he said excited about having Robbie and Holden still here. I look forward to that competition, but I think this addition has definitely improved us. Freeze also went on to say that Thorne is probably more proven than any transfer quarterback he's ever had before. He says resume at Michigan State speaks for itself. 3 seasons there in East Lansing, threw for almost 6,500 yards, 49 touchdowns, 24 picks, had a QB rating of 131 last year. And so we will see what Payton Thorne does this year. But look, he's got to be the starter, right? It feels like at this point, bringing in a guy with that many skins on the wall, is Robbie Ashford really going to beat Payton Thorne out at this point? It feels like Thorne is coming in and he will be the starter for Auburn. So going to be fun to track that along the way. In other SEC news, this came out the other day, but Georgia Bulldogs will not be making the trip to the White House. According to Seth Emerson of The Athletic, the program declined an invitation to go meet with the president on June 12th. That date, Georgia said, doesn't work with their student-athlete schedule. They put out a statement, said, unfortunately, the date suggested is not feasible given the student-athlete calendar and time of year. However, we're appreciative of the invitation from the White House. Look forward to other opportunities for Georgia teams moving forward. The last college football champion to visit the White House was LSU back in 2020 after they beat Clemson. And, of course, that was right before COVID and the pandemic and all that hit. The Athens Banner-Herald reported in February that President Joe Biden said he was looking forward to welcoming the Georgia Bulldogs to the White House, but it took forever for them to extend an invitation. Georgia said in a statement that their invite didn't come until May the 3rd. I mean, that was just a week ago. Final exams wrap up this week at Georgia, and most of the team will depart for the summer before they come back for summer workouts later in June. The LSU women's basketball team and the UConn men's basketball team, they're going to visit the White House on May 26th. I just, in my opinion, just hearing the details here, White House waited too long. Georgia wins the championship back in January. Invitations should go out pretty soon and get them in there in February and March, right? I mean, all these guys that were preparing for the draft, they're all drafted by teams going off to do their rookie mini camps. All the guys that got drafted by the Eagles and stuff. It just seems like it would be hard to all get back together and get up to DC in just a couple weeks. So that's just my 2 cents. Look, some people feel like whenever you get an invite from the White House, no matter who it is, find a way to make it work. Get up there and go be honored. But it just feels like the timing. You send out an invitation on May 3rd. You say, hey, come join us June 12th. Well, why do we wait so long? Georgia won the championship back in June. Feels like it should have happened weeks and weeks and weeks ago. But I digress. Georgia wide receiver Denylon Morissette. He was arrested early Monday morning on several charges, including DUI. He's a rising second-year player with the Bulldogs. Was a 4-star prospect out of high school. Played in 11 games for Georgia as a freshman. Had just 4 catches for 34 yards. He had 3 catches in the Georgia G-Day spring game back a couple of weeks ago. And far from the first Georgia player to have some kind of off-the-field issues. Jamin Dumas-Johnson was arrested in January for reckless driving. Of course, Jalen Carter was involved in that drag racing tragedy. Devin Willock was involved in that. It was just a awful situation. And Javon Bullard and Kenny McIntosh were involved in recent charges involving motor vehicles. So we'll keep an eye on Denylon Morissette and see what happens with him. One other note, Dominic Blaylock, former Georgia wide receiver, announced he is heading to Georgia Tech. According to On3 Sports, Blaylock will transfer to Georgia Tech after he talked with a ton of different schools. He entered the transfer portal in January, played in 29 total games for the Bulldogs, caught 35 passes for 548 yards. Over at Alabama, they have picked up a commitment from former ULL cornerback Trey Amos, 6'1", 197 pounds, spent 3 seasons with the Raging Cajuns before entering the transfer portal. He'll have 2 years of eligibility. He started 10 of his 11 games for ULL last season, finished with 35 tackles, 8 pass breakups, and a tackle for a loss. He appeared in a combined 23 games over his first 2 seasons in Lafayette. And so he will join a group that's very talented. When you consider Kool-Aid McKinstry, Terry and Arnold, Earl Little had a big interception in the spring game. And now they will add Trey Amos to the mix, and we'll see what he can do in that Alabama secondary. Bama did lose Traquan Fagans recently. He left to join USC, and Jaquez Robinson left to transfer to Colorado. They also lost Eli Ricks, who declared for the NFL draft but went undrafted. Amos, the fourth transfer to head to Alabama, joining Notre Dame quarterback Tyler Buckner, linebacker Tresman Marshall, and tight end CJ Dipper, who came in this offseason. One other note on Alabama, RJ Young from Fox Sports, he has Alabama at number 8 in his post-spring rankings. He said, you have every reason to doubt Alabama, and that's why they'll probably mess around and make everybody call home. He says Alabama should have a good ground game this season and should have a really good defense. He said, so it doesn't matter if your quarterback dominates the game when it's about the defense and running the football. Young believes Ty Simpson and Jalen Milroe can do the job, but neither is Bryce Young. We'll see if either of those two or Tyler Buckner wins the Alabama job. But look, we know Alabama's going to get back to dominant run game, dominant defense. Maybe they just need a game manager at quarterback to make things happen. Another note on the Florida-Georgia game. Jacksonville Mayor Lenny Curry said this week that the Florida-Georgia game will probably have to move from Jacksonville for 2 seasons because of some upcoming renovations on the stadium in Jacksonville. He was appearing on 1010 XL in Jacksonville this week. He said, best case scenario, the renovation will take place over 2 years and impact 2 football seasons. And said the Gators, Bulldogs, and the Jaguars will have to play someone else over that span. He said a timeline for the stadium is that the work would take place in 2025 and 2026. If you remember, Florida and Georgia released a joint statement last year about the rivalry game in Jacksonville. The contract runs through this year with options to expand in 2024 and 2025. Of course, Kirby's been pushing, saying, look, we need to get this game back on campus. It's a great rivalry. It should be played on campus, not on neutral field in Jacksonville. It's just harder to get recruits in and out and entertain them and all that kind of stuff. So we'll see what happens here. But if they do renew that rivalry and keep it in Jacksonville for years to come, sounds like they'll have to take it elsewhere in those 2 years, 2025 and 2026. By the way, Jacksonville Jaguars playing more games in London. They'd have to leave their stadium. 2 years for renovations on the stadium. Seems like a long time. But we'll see what happens with that. Over at LSU, 11 football players are going to be entering a study abroad program. LSU, in a statement released, said that players will be traveling to Senegal, Africa for 8 days to study abroad. It will introduce LSU student athletes to Senegal's rich culture and its strong ties to Louisiana. Brian Kelly gave his stamp of approval on it, said one of the things I've tried to do since coming to LSU is not only set the standards in the process of building a program that graduates champions, but to help our players establish an identity outside of football. So expanding their horizons, sending some players over there to learn in a different country. Over at Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin, he loves Nick Saban. And he said recently, look, Saban is the greatest coach ever to ever coach college football because he's doing it in an era different than Bear Bryant. And some of those names because of scholarship limitations compared to back then. He took a moment to imagine if Nick Saban had unlimited scholarships, if he could take on like 150 players, he said, good luck to everybody else. It would be Alabama and Georgia, I guess, and that's it. Kiffin went on to say he still views Nick Saban as a close friend personally. He said he's like a family member where I can joke about him or something, but if someone else does, it really pisses me off. So Lane Kiffin, protective of his buddy Nick Saban, but like a family friend or relatives. That's only I can rip on him, okay? Over at Texas A&M, Jimbo Fisher picking up a big-time flip and a commitment. Former Florida State commit Jordan Pride, a 4-star safety out of the state of Florida. He has committed to play for Texas A&M. He's considered the number 84 player in the class of 2024, the number 6 safety in the country, and the number 13 player from the state of Florida. He's the top-rated player in the Aggies class so far, their 3rd defensive player to commit, 1st defensive back. And that's a big pickup there for the Aggies. Jordan Pride going to College Station. One other note here on the college football playoff. Obviously, we know the expansion's coming. Joel Klatt had some interesting comments this week about, the schedule, how it's been kind of set for 2024 and 2025. And he said, look, we need to avoid going head-to-head with the NFL playoffs, with the college football playoff. He said, that's the most powerful sports entity on the planet. Why would you want to compete with the NFL? He said he believes the way to improve the schedule is to have the playoffs before the new year and have the championship game on New Year's Day. He said a New Year's Day championship game is synonymous with college football. Bring back that tradition. Own Saturday and New Year's Day. And I kind of like the thought there. I mean, this whole talk of expanding and playing games into January, and NFL's getting into their playoffs. It just feels like there should be a little separation there. We're kind of stepping on each other's toes with college football and the NFL. And lastly, a SEC hoops nugget. Aaron Bradshaw reaffirming his commitment to Kentucky. According to multiple reports, the five-star recruit addressed rumors during an Instagram live session. Rumors said that he would decommit from Kentucky and go join Bronny James at USC. Bradshaw said on the Instagram live, I'm not going to USC. I'm 100% staying at Kentucky. He's a big part of Kentucky's number one ranked recruiting class, currently ranked as the number 4 overall player in the country. The number 1 center in the country comes from New Jersey, 7 foot tall, 210 pounds. And there you have it. That is the latest news going on around the conference. Thank you guys so much for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Every day or tomorrow on the show, we are going to take a look at some of the over-under win totals that just came out from our friends over at FanDuel. So you don't want to miss that. I've got some locks for you tomorrow. I mean, some of these SEC over-under win totals, I got some locks that are definitely going to hit the over. I got some locks that are definitely on the under. So we'll hit on that all on tomorrow's show right here on Locked On SEC. Our thanks again to Charlie Potter from Bama Online 24/7 Sports. Appreciate him stopping by, talking a little bit about Alabama football. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.